I want to welcome everyone to Southern District ITE's mentorship session on business development tips. I'm Bob Murphy, and I'm Vice President and Senior Advisor for KCI Technologies in Nashville. I will serve as the moderator for our panel today. I want to also remind everybody that this is being recorded. It will be on YouTube, which will be posted to the Southern District's website, so that, for people who miss it, can watch this, or, if you think we're just so fantastic, you want to see it 2 or 3 more times, you could watch it again. First of all, I want to thank Southern District for putting this mentorship session on. I hope you've been able to watch some of the previous ones. It's been really, I think, an excellent resource for our members. So thanks to Southern District, and a special thanks to Becky Rogers, who has spearheaded this effort. So great job. So I've been involved in ITE at the section, district, and national levels, international levels for many years. I also have over 40 years of experience. Most of that has been in the private sector. I've been involved in business development for much of my career. So I've learned a lot of what not to do, first of all, but also as well as a number of good practices and strategies for business development. And to start out today, I just wanted to throw out a definition of business development so we all understand what we're talking about today. Business development can be summarized as the ideas, initiatives, and activities that help make a business more successful. This includes increasing revenues, growth in terms of business expansion, increasing profitability by building strategic partnerships, and making strategic business decisions. Business development involves a wide range of activities, such as pursuing opportunities to help your business grow, identifying new prospects, developing client relationships, and converting more leads into customers and projects. Now, for our discussion today, I want to draw a distinction between the terms marketing and business development. These are terms that are often used interchangeably, but they're really different activities. And for the purpose of our discussion, marketing refers to the development of materials and tools that support the development of relationships and winning of work. And this includes activities such as advertising, public relations, and developing promotional materials. And as I described previously, business development refers to developing relationships with clients, direct interaction and communication with clients, networking, and other activities related to winning new work with new and existing clients. So next, what I want to do is introduce our panelists. And we've got a couple of really experienced and distinguished panelists to help us in our discussion. First of all, I want to introduce Chris Rhodes. Chris has over 25 years of experience specializing in the fields of ITS, traffic engineering, and transportation planning. He's a vice president and owner within Kimley Horn and Associates. Since 2006, Chris has been Nashville, Tennessee based, and has also practiced in the states of Virginia and Georgia as an employee of Kimley Horn since 1997. He is a licensed PE in the states of Tennessee, Georgia, Kentucky, and Virginia. He holds both a BS and an MS in civil engineering from the University of Tennessee. As some of y'all know, he is very active as an ITE member, previously serving as the Tennessee section president, and is currently chairing the Southern District ITE Leadership Development Committee. Chris was born and raised in West Tennessee. He now lives in Brentwood with his wife, Vonda, of 26 years, and their 2 sons, William and Elijah. Chris is a rabid University of Tennessee sports fanatic and has an addictive habit of collecting Hot Wheels die-cast cars, and also enjoys bicycling on the rare occasions that he finds time to do so. So welcome, Chris.
Thanks, sir.
And our second panelist is Preston Elliott. Preston has served as Deputy Commissioner and as the Chief of Environment and Planning Bureau with the Tennessee Department of Transportation since 2020. Having worked with TDOT also early in his career, Preston has over 25 years of community and transportation planning experience within Tennessee and the Southeast. Prior to rejoining TDOT, Preston spent 16 years in the private sector, working with both a national firm as well as an international firm, providing professional planning services to communities large and small. In addition to his DOT and private consulting experience, Preston has also worked with 3 metropolitan planning organizations, and as a community volunteer, he served 12 years on the Franklin, Tennessee Transit Authority Board. Preston is a certified planner, and he has worked in every mode of transportation, from walking, biking, transit, and vehicular planning to truck, freight, rail, and shared mobility. Now, Preston and I worked together at RPM Transportation and then at KCI for a number of years. And one of his primary roles was in business development. So Preston brings a unique and valuable perspective, having business development experience in both the public and the private sector. Welcome, Preston.
Thank you, Bob. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So before we jump into our discussion, we're going to go through 4 poll questions to our audience. So what I would like for you to do is to respond to each question. Our first question is, how long have you been working since college graduation? So please answer that. We'll wait and see how the poll comes up once it starts to stabilize. People are answering quickly, so that's good. So it's interesting. I mean, you can see that we have a pretty good spread in terms of experience. It's good to see that we've got some people here with 10 years or less. The majority are over 20 years. But I think what you will see is that with our presentation, that what we have to cover, I think, is appropriate for all years of experience. So that is good to see that variation. Now, our second poll question, we'll move into that next. And that is, what describes your current employment? So public sector, private sector, university, or other. I think, as you can see, the private sector is the majority of our attendance. I think that's understandable considering our topic, but I'm also pleased to see that we've got some public sector, university, and other, not sure what that is, but once again, I think we have some really valuable information that would be worthwhile to everyone, regardless of what your current employment is, even though when we think of business development, we really have a tendency to think it's more appropriate or it applies more to the private sector. Okay, and then our third question is, how much of your time is currently spent on activities related to business development? Looks like we've got once again a variety of levels. The largest percentage is 25% or less, followed by none, which I think that's good because it's a good opportunity here today to learn some information about business development. About I guess 11% of the respondents have spent 51 to 75% of their time on business development. Okay, and I think now our last question. how much of your time is currently spent on preparing responses to proposals, which are RFPs, or responses to qualifications, RFQs? So this is just actually how much time are you spending, on these type activities that are an aspect of business development. And the vast majority is spending 25% or less. Of course, for most of us professionals, if we're spending about 25% of our time on proposals, that's fairly normal. Some of us spend a lot more. And once again, we have a number of people, almost a third, that don't spend any time on that. So once again, I think we're going to have some really good information to share in terms of every level of experience with business development. So I think with that, we'll just move on into our panel discussion. And the way I'd like to run this is I've just got some questions that I'm going to ask Preston and Chris, and we'll get some discussion going about the various aspects of business development. And then, we will leave some time at the end for audience questions and answers, but let's just jump in. And Chris, for your first question, I'd like for you to just give us your insight on the importance of business development for consultants, including why business development, is a team effort, and what are some of the ways young professionals can start to develop skills in business development?
Certainly. Well, first on the importance, I think it's priority one. If you don't have business development in your consulting business, you're not going to have a consulting business very long. I like to tell people, if you're not in the market, then you have no chance of getting your portion of the market per se. In terms of it being a team effort, I really like and enjoy partnering and not going solo when it comes to business development, and for several reasons. When you're meeting with the client, you're not going to remember all the topics you want to discuss. You're not going to remember all the questions. We're here in the Southern District. Almost every meeting in the South starts with a little bit of small talk. How's your mom and them? How's the kids? Why did they not convert that 3rd and 8 on Saturday afternoon? So those sorts of things that can be helpful when you've got a partner to help carry the conversation. A partner can help you take notes. As many times when you're carrying the conversation, you can't really remember everything that the client or the prospective client may be sharing with you. And then finally, I think a partner can do a really good job of helping you sort of remembering what was discussed after when you do a debrief. And then your final topic, I was excited to see that we had a few young whippersnappers on the call here, some young folks. I think the advice that I would give to our youngest folks, the EITs or the young planners that are just getting started, is your goal should not be I got to go help drag home a 6-figure job. I think your goal should be, as a young person, is finding a way to get involved and getting in the community. And that very much could be with professional organizations like ITE, or if you're a planner, APA. If you do private sector work serving the private sector in transportation, maybe ULI is something you want to get involved with. Advice to the young folks would be become a committee member, or maybe get involved with sort of coordinating the social gatherings that your organization may have. I'd also suggest, finding things you're passionate about in terms of community organizations. I'm thinking about here in Nashville, if you're interested in Transit Now is something that you may have interest in. One of our young landscape architects, she got involved in the city's BPAC, which is their Bicycle Pedestrian Advocacy Committee. So those sorts of things, finding a way to get connected. I mean, your goal as a young person is to grow your network and to grow your networking skills. Don't worry about dragging home the 6-figure job. Meet the person on the public sector side that's your equivalent, because that young EIT that works for the DOT, or that young planner that works for the MPO, they may work their way into being someone who's the director of that organization. And if you spent time building a vested relationship it's going to give you a greater opportunity to maybe work with them in the future. And then the final thing I'll say, Bob, is in many cases on the consulting side, there's always this pressure to, I've got to get so externally focused that I want to grow my marketing skills. I'd say within your first 4 to 5 years, don't forget that it's also critically important to grow your technical skills. So don't dismiss the growth technically for the growth, what I would consider marketing, business development, and network.
Yeah, those are really excellent points, Chris. I wholeheartedly agree with everything you said. I like especially what you said in regards to young professionals, because, I know when we start out, sometimes, first of all, engineers are introverts for the most part. And, I think we can say a lot of planners they may not be quite as introverted as engineers, but they still have some of that same characteristics. And by trying to find some of the ways, such as professional organizations or community organizations, to be involved is a good way to kind of ease your way into that. So really
Absolutely.
good. Preston, do you have any insights that you can add from the public agency perspective regarding the importance of business development?
Yeah, well, great. Yeah, I think what Chris said was some really great points. I think what's important to remember about the profession that we're in is that while we all want to land, I'm speaking from a past tense perspective of work chasing, now being on the public side, I'm not chasing work, but I'm allowing types of projects to be advanced and so forth, to be advertised or to move forward. The reality is that this is a partnership that goes both public and private. You should be thinking about your profession and how you're in this for the long term. It's not a specific project that you're trying to win, but it's communities that you live in. It's communities that you're reshaping, and the relationships you have are long term. They're not just if you think it's one project, then you're going to be one and done. It really is needs to be looked at a long view. Probably if you asked me about 16 years ago if I'd be back at TDOT, I probably would have said no. But so you always have to remember, that being in the profession, you're constantly thinking about your peers, whether they're competitors, public or private, and it's a community. And I think most of you all on this webinar know that because you participate in TSITE and other activities and know the community that you have with one another in our profession. I think it's important to be active and involved, whether it's in a professional association or at the community level. Chris mentioned a few of those opportunities that exist. Every community has some sort of committee or some sort of opportunity to participate. I think it helps strengthen your understanding about what clients need and want. And that is very valuable. And so I guess I would just say that it's really about the relationship, and it's about looking at things long-term, not necessarily as a singular component.
Great. Yeah. Good job on following up from the public agency perspective, and also, identifying that, we never are going to know in the future. We might be working in the private sector now or in the public sector now. Our roles may switch, as you well know. So, Chris, business development, there's all kinds of activities involved in what we term business development, but can you just give us some examples of the types of business activities that consultants are typically involved in? You've given, a little bit, but could you expound on that?
So I always like to say that I don't golf and I don't drink beer, but I've still found great opportunities to get involved in business development. I remember my dad told me very early, Chris, you need to learn the game of golf. And I know I never did, and I never will. It's just not my thing. But yeah, there's lots of opportunities. It comes down to you need to find ways to be where your clients are. And that may very well be a number of the professional organizations that we just mentioned. but it might be the Rotary Club in the city where you practice. I personally do a lot of public sector work, so I've periodically went to the Tennessee City Management meeting. You know, I'm not a city manager, but that's where 200 plus city managers that oversee budgets for cities, you know, meet on a regular basis. It may be that the American Public Works Association, if you're hunting public sector work, is the right way to be. I would say presenting at meetings, that will very much get your business development improved in terms of you'll be seen as someone who's a technical expert on the topic. And if the city you're doing a project for feels strongly enough about you to have you present, that helps build credibility for yourself as well. So presenting at meetings, running for office, getting on committees. And then, I mean, it comes down to, for me, business development is getting to know my client and getting to know my client's business. And that is truly one-on-one or two-on-two if you're partnering with someone, you know, meeting with that client, understanding their wants and needs and what their program's all about. And, you know, once you get to know them better, then you might get into doing some pre-sale where you know about opportunities, and we can talk about pre-sale a little bit later. But I mean, it's truly networking and being where your clients are and finding ways to do that. And then, and I often say this, the last thing I want to do is sound like the used car salesman. So to do my best to not sound like I'm selling a widget, but I'm wanting to build a relationship. And I'm not just there to get what, as Preston said, the next project per se. It's building genuine relationships.
Great. Preston, you know, I would say, you know, you can expound on what Chris has said, given your experience in the private sector, but I'd also like for you to give us a sense of the type of business activities that public agency professionals experience kind of in a typical daily basis or something like that.
Yeah, sure. And please keep this in mind. I mean, this is a view and perspective of where I sit within this organization. This could be totally different in a city, a county, or a different public agency. But the things that I think is important that, you know, Chris hit on those. I think those are all really good. I think what's important is to remember that, you know, organizations have many different levels. And that means that there are younger staff, junior staff, middle level staff, and senior staff in an organization. And when you're thinking about the business development and importance and how to interact, you know, some of the things that Chris mentioned too in those presentations or presenting, you know, don't forget to, you know, if it's the good work that you've done for a client, to make sure you include that client, whether you're co-presenting or you're making sure you're giving that recognition. I think that's very valuable because, you know, good work is rewarded by more good work, right? And in the consulting profession, that's a good thing. And, you know, and employees feel that way in the public sector as well. So when there's that recognition and the ability to be shared, I think that goes a long ways in both regards. You know, in terms of platforms and whether, you know, how the activities, I mean, it could be in some of the efforts or initiatives that a government agency may have, whatever may be important to them. They may have cleanup initiatives, or they may have outings that support things. Those are always great places to build relationships and camaraderie. Again, as kind of Chris alluded to, you don't want to be the used car salesman or salesperson. You know, you're really trying to cultivate a relationship and understanding what your client's needs are. And then that helps you as you work towards figuring out how you can provide that service.
Hey, Bob, I've even done this before where I will ask the client, how do you want to be marketed? Because I don't want to come across as the person who's pestering you, but I do want to come across as the person who has genuine interest in building a relationship and having the opportunity to work with you in the future. I think that's important to ask them sometimes how they want to be marketed.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I also think, you know, your clients are different people too, right? Some people may not want you to pester them or contact them over and over. But then you might have some clients who say, listen, I really would like for you to, kind of remind me and keep in touch on a regular
Absolutely.
basis. And, it just depends. Some people might be annoyed by too much contact, and then other people might feel like you're not contacting them enough to give them the attention they need.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. I'll go back to Chris again. So we talked a little bit about this, Chris, but let's dive into this deeper. What do you see as really the key skills for staff that are either involved in business development or are going to be involved sometime in business development?
So I'm going to start with the baseline of you're technically competent. We're going to assume that exists, that you're not marketing or trying to develop business in an area that's not your expertise. So I'd say it really comes down to two things: personality and credibility. I don't go and market wastewater treatment plants because that's not my thing. I'm not credible in that market. I would say clients choose to work with people they like and people they know they can get the job done. So if you've got a personality and you've got credibility, those are very much the two most important things. Clients don't hire consulting firms. Yeah, I'm guessing the client, Bob, they didn't hire KCI. They probably hired Bob Murphy because they had respect for Bob Murphy. So I've got a good friend in this market who has worked for several firms over the years, and they're not hiring him because of the name that's at the top of the card. They're hiring because they trust him, they like working with him, and he has a history of getting the job done. I would say this: in your consulting firm, do not select the geeky, introverted, pocket protecting wearing engineer to do your business development. Select someone who has a personality that can carry a conversation and has got sort of a sphere of influence and credibility in the marketplace.
Yeah, good point. I'd also add, there are, like I said, so many of us that are working in this field are somewhat introverted or maybe even very introverted. I mean, I myself always felt like I'm a very introverted person, but that doesn't mean that I don't have a personality, and I would say the same for most everybody out there. You may be quiet or shy, or you may not be the person that walks in the room and then the room revolves around you. That does not mean that you don't have a personality or that you can't interact, particularly on a one-on-one basis. So I think Chris is really spot on there, but just I guess what I'm saying is don't sell yourself short on that either.
Or Bob, maybe if you're more introverted, partner with that extrovert when you go to do some business development. And the strengths of one can help carry the weaknesses of the other. Right.
And we all learn, right? I mean, you go with somebody who has done this for a long time and is really good at it. I mean, you learn how that person interacts, and you learn some of the skills, some of the tips, et cetera. So Preston, I'll ask you the same question, but from the public agency perspective. Obviously, the skills Chris has described apply also, but are there any additional skills that you would say are important?
Yeah, no, I think that something that Chris pointed out is really good. I mean, so, again, on the business development side, I'm going with the assumption that you have that relationship. And so if you're with your client or, that you've already cultivated that relationship and you're in an area of discussion of a specific expertise that you may or may not have. I mean, I think that you obviously want to make sure you're providing your client with the skill set that they're looking for or discipline. But I think with that, what's really important is to make sure that you have articulated to the additional person or persons that you're going to engage with your client. Remember, that's your relationship, that you're safeguarding against that, because you don't want to have you go in there with somebody that may be too much on the extrovert side, and you walk away from that and your client in that relationship is kind of lost it because they're thinking, well, is that the person I'm going to be working with? on this effort. So I think it's really important to make sure you somewhat understand your client and you work with your team set of skills that you're trying to interject, that you've conditioned them to know, how your client is and what, because if they're too aggressive or too assertive, I think that, as Bob pointed out, in some cases, your client may be highly introverted because they're very technical, and you don't want to come across too much on that regard. So I think it's a balance for sure, and you have to know your client to be able to determine that. I think what's important in skill sets in business development is listening. And I think that if you want to win work and do good work, you need to listen, because your client's going to tell you something. They may not put it in particular words. It could be in their actions or how they disposition themselves on a comment. So I think it's important to make sure in a skill set on business development, you're thinking about that.
Yeah, very good. That listening skill is one that's important, I think, in all aspects of life, pretty much. So it's obviously important in business development. Chris, let's talk about positioning your firm for work. Can you kind of walk us through what you believe are the key business development steps to successfully position your firm for work? And I'm kind of talking now, this would be at the pre-proposal or pre-RFP stage, possibly even before a specific project has been identified by the potential client.
Okay, yeah. And we're also getting a few questions that I'm guessing you'll want to hold those to the end. Some of those are popping up in the chat. So I'll often say this: if you don't know about the project until the day it hits the street, you're not going to win it, or you have a very slim chance of winning it. So you're spot on. It's some of the early on stuff. You've got to be known in the market. You've got to spend some time. I know when I first came to Nashville in, my goodness, 2005, 2006, we weren't a known commodity in Nashville by any stretch. So I spent some time with some meet and greets with city engineers, planning directors, developers, just introducing them to Kimley who, and then who Chris Rhodes or who my partners were. So you've got to establish name recognition. I think when you're meeting with the client, you've got to understand where they've used consultants in the past. Where do they use outside help, and what are the issues and the concerns they have. It may be that you can help them get funding, because sometimes they may have an issue if you're working for a smaller agency, but not yet privy to how they can, go see Preston up at the DOT and get some funding for projects. So definitely help them with understanding funding and actually creating an opportunity. If you help a client get some money, there's a good chance that you might be able to do the work on the back end when that RFQ comes out. I think on the front end, especially if you're working for a big firm, there's always the scenario of, oh, absolutely, we can do that job. But it's the question of, can you win the job? And understanding that it's not always your technical prowess or your relationship. And sometimes there's politics involved, and understanding when it's the right time to consider teaming with another firm versus going at it solo, or versus just saying, hey, this is not the right opportunity for us. So long story short, gathering lots of information on the front end before a project actually hits the street will position you well for having an opportunity to win the job.
Yeah, very much so. Preston, once again, you can kind of cover this from both sides, but in particular, and please do if you want to add more on the private perspective, but just from the public agency perspective, what do you see as important business development activities at this stage?
Yeah, I think Chris is spot on. I mean, if you didn't know about an RFP or a project, before it was advertised, I mean, you're at a really big disadvantage for sure. If you've cultivated that relationship with your client or potential clients, those communications, you're kind of aware of what's coming out, and in fact, you may be aware of what type of advertising it may be, and that could help you as you begin to formulate either a team or formulate your approach. So I think that it's really important to be out ahead of that for sure. And if you're going after repeat work, I mean, and some of you, I think more than 50% were 20 years of experience or more, I think, on this session here. As you know, if you're recompeting for work, you also want to make sure you're putting together your components for that future RFP that's coming out, and anticipating what those types of services may be. But I guess I just think that it's the long game. If you have that perspective, you should know well in advance. Now, keep in mind, there could be an RFP or an RFQ that comes out and you didn't know about it, Blue Oval. But maybe we can't say specifically why that is. And it's open for everyone, even though if you didn't know about it. Sometimes on economic type development, that can occur. We just don't have those abilities to oftentimes say, or they may just come up a lot faster in the process.
Okay, good. We'll cover a couple more questions in our discussion, and then we'll move to the questions from the audience. But Preston, let me start with you on this. Can you just give us an overview of the typical TDOT proposal process? I mean, I think you know how to do this in a relatively short fashion. And while the TDOT process is certainly not the same for all public agencies, I think your overview will give everyone a good sense of the overall proposal process.
Yeah, sure. I mean, okay, so again, this kind of goes back into your client base, right? Some of your clients are going to use different advertisement processes. So if you're talking about about TDOT specifically, if it's engineering related, oftentimes it's going to follow the Brooks Act, and it's the letter of interest and the Part 2 process, and probably I would bet most of you that have chased any amount of work for the department that the 330 form is probably the ugliest proposal you've probably ever put together. It is what it is. It's a process that we utilize. A lot of state DOTs utilize similar, very structured formats. But those processes for the letter of interest and then your full proposal with the Part 2, I mean, that's typically going to be any of our engineering related type work, any sort of engineering services. Where we veer a little bit is in the RFQ or RFP process, which those are oftentimes going to be either planning related services or some sort of service that doesn't really fall within the Brooks Act kind of confines. We do have a procurement division within TDOT that assists each division that utilizes the RFP process. We even have sometimes the requests for information or request to bid. So there's a few different R's that are used through that process. It follows, in those cases, oftentimes some sort of ratio between technical and cost, whereas on the engineering services, it's all based on qualifications. In terms of interviews, we do interviews. It will vary on the type of service of the division that's releasing it. So it's not really a given, if that makes sense. Again, this probably is a great area of knowing your client, and not just for TDOT, but any particular client, whether they will interview or won't interview. Also about whether they, are they looking for a brief letter of interest or a more, beefier letter of interest? And you need to figure that out before you submit something. And I guess I would say this from the TDOT perspective, not all divisions are the same. So you may, if you're chasing work in one of, let's say, our asset management, or you're chasing work in design, or chasing work in survey, they may all totally be different in terms of what they're looking for. So if you're interacting with those particular divisions, you should understand what type of work they're looking for. And also if they're going to do interviews. In terms of the selection process, there are all of our RFP, RFQ, part one, part twos process. They all go through somewhat of an evaluation on the technical level, and then ultimately the commissioner selects from a shortlisted of firms that division feels that particular firm can assist them with. On the RFQ process or RFP, it's a little bit more mathematical, and you end up with an ultimate winner or set of winners with a little bit less of a picking opportunity. So that, again, that's kind of a really high, quick level at the department. But again, I'm sure each and every one of you have seen a different process across your different client bases, so hopefully that's helpful.
No, that's great. And you're right. I think, the process can vary considerably, but I think what you've covered really covers most of the key aspects of it. And I think, the other big takeaway, once again, is you have to know what your client is looking for. And as you mentioned, different divisions or, different organizations may have some different requirement than another one. So you have to understand that. Chris, let's go ahead and move to the stage where, the RFP, RFQ has already been released. What is your insight on some of the key strategies that are involved in responding successfully to that response or request?
I would say respect the process. We talked about personality earlier. Procurement people are not the most personable people, and forgiveness and a sense of humor are sometimes not. So respect their process. Do not give them a reason to call your submittal. You got to make good go, no go decisions. And from there, I'm talking about, you may have pre-sold this and have known about the project for a while, but the timing of when it came out may be that there's been a change in leadership at that organization, or your project or your team has gotten super busy and it may not be the right time to go after that project. So I'd say get with your partners and make a good go, no go decision on the RFQ. Understand contract language. Man, the absolute worst thing to do is you've done everything right from the business development perspective. You've won the job, the selection committee loves you and they select you, and then you look at the contract language and there's some language in there that your firm is never going to sign. And the client's attorney is not going to change the language. So the worst thing is to win the job and then have to walk because the contract turns. So understand that. Understand your workload. I'd say also it's important to kind of understand, for instance, and TDOT may be a good example. TDOT may have 5 different things coming out this year. And that your firm is good enough to do all those 5 things. And you have to figure out, I'm not going to win all 5, and figure out and strategize which one is the right one. But ultimately, it comes down to putting together a response that is consistent with what they've asked for, and make it easy to read and make it something that's enjoyable to read. Don't wear them out with text. I'm big on having color and having photos. A picture tells 1,000 words. Don't make it just a fully justified 10-point font full of a whole bunch of text. Make sure it's enjoyable to read and it's something they will enjoy. But that's maybe a few pointers.
Yeah, that's great. Preston, last question before we move to the audience questions. Let's talk about the public agency's evaluations of responses leading to a selection. What are some of the key difference makers that the public agency reviewers are looking for?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is just my perspective from what I've seen here, and not necessarily universal. So make sure you know your client. One thing I think is important is making sure that if you're going after some work, whatever it may be, is that your project examples are very relevant. That it speaks to what the service that the client's asking for. I think that it's important also to be thinking about the people that you have on the project and how they relate back to that service that's being asked. I think those are, very key, important things that on the public side are looked at. Obviously relationships are there, but I think that if it's a specific type of service that an agency is looking for, the person and the project should match up to that. I think that's pretty key. It's really hard to kind of answer, because obviously there's just a variety of things that could play into that process, but I think those are probably the two big ones.
Okay. Here's a question I'm going to throw to both of y'all. For Chris, how often do you meet with clients? For Preston, how often would you like to have consultants meet with you? Never is not an acceptable answer, Preston.
Bob, I think it depends on the client. I don't make it a goal for every week to do something business development related, but some weeks it may be I'm doing two things. I always think lunch is easy, and regardless of whether, the consultant can pay for lunch or not, I think you need to ask your client that. If I thought buying lunch led to projects, I'd buy a lot of lunches. So it's not, it's important to understand their requirements, but I would say on a monthly basis, 3 to 5 times, but those are with different clients, not with the same client.
Right. Preston?
Yeah, no. So this is kind of that fine line, right? I mean, and I think, knowing your client is important. If I suspect if you attempted to set up more meetings than were necessary, you'd quickly find out that the person's unavailable. You want to make sure you're not overdoing it, for sure. For myself, I don't have a problem meeting with consultants. And when I first started, I had a lot that wanted to meet, and did quite a few virtual. It doesn't really matter to me. Really the issue is time, and you need to know your clients in terms of their time availability. If you're going to invite them to some lunch or to some out of pocket kind of thing, that may be very challenging just because of their availability. It would be for myself in that regard. But conversations here and there, and if you're at like obviously with COVID, it's been a little challenging, but if you're at a TSITE or any sort of event, you're going to run into your clients. Natural occurrences are good, and if you feel the need to set something up to get a lay of the land, and then you should figure that out. But I'd be cautious about overdoing it, for sure.
And I always went to a lot of functions, whether they were professional organization meetings or community meetings or whatever. And an advantage there is you can actually see more than one person. The other thing, Preston alluded to this, but you got to realize a person like Preston, I mean, there's people all over the state that want to meet with him. So, his time is limited. So, you just can't, you can't be too annoying with trying to overwhelm him with meetings. So that, once again, that just depends on the client. So here's a question I'll throw out that I think is good. This is when I just moved to a new country, and I'm one of the 2 traffic engineers in my group. What kind of homework do I need to do to understand what our competitors are doing and what we need to compete with them? Chris, you want to start off?
Yeah, I can start. So if you're wanting to see what your competitor is doing on the public realm, meeting minutes from a council meeting, contracts go through city council or county commission. So if you want to understand what they're doing in the public realm, be a sleuth and be a detective and spend some time on the city's website. You can see what your competition is doing. LinkedIn is another good spot where, many of us have LinkedIn platforms or accounts, and some people like to talk a lot about what they're doing on projects. And so spend some time on a professional networking site like LinkedIn, and you can figure out what others are doing. Yeah, go to the monthly meeting. If you have a monthly meeting where you're eating breakfast with some of your counterparts, if it's ITE or APA, you know, conversation starters there can help you understand what folks are doing.
Yeah, good. Hey, Preston, I'm going to ask you one now. What are the most annoying or ineffective things consultants do for business development that you would like to see changed?
Oh man, that's an interesting. I don't really know. I mean, you know, I've got a great gatekeeper, so that's sometimes I don't see a lot of those types of annoying things. You know, and it's just probably none of us on this particular one here, but you know, there are some vendors that will just send these ridiculously blank kind of, you know, now that we have a new infrastructure bill, so how they can help us spend the infrastructure money. I mean, you know, there's just no thought process about what type of work we do, how it fits together. I would say that, you know, you wouldn't want anyone to waste your time, you know, come to your house, knock on your door and bother you with stuff that's not really relevant. So it's the same thing for any client that you have. I mean, know the business, know what's important, and come there with a purpose, rather than just like blanket emails that, you know, just, you know, talk about endless types of services that you know, that may or may not be relevant to the client.
Yeah, good. Hey, Chris, can you offer some advice on when to team or when not to team with other consultants?
Yeah, you know, sometimes it may not be your turn to win. Or, you know, let's say City of Mayberry, and you just won the last 2 jobs. And there's another one coming out where you've still got capacity, and boy, I'm passionate about that. It may be a great opportunity for you to talk to your competitor across town and say, hey, it's not my turn to win, but I think if we teamed up with you, they like working with us, and you've got a great relationship, that we could win this job together. Sometimes you may be the right firm that can do that in your mind, that can do the job the best and have the technical prowess to do it, but you don't have the relationship and the other firm does. And maybe that's the time to team if the other consultant is willing. But it is truly, it is an art. It is not a science. You know, we team with multiple firms. We team sometimes with the same firm in certain geographic regions because we've got a great relationship. If you're going to team, make sure it's a group that you can work with. You know, it's a group that you have similar philosophies and you've partnered well together. And of course, you won't know that the first time. But, you know, there are some firms that I've teamed with multiple times because we're like peas and carrots. It works well.
Yeah, good. Hey, Preston, here's one you could probably answer. What is more valuable regarding the relevant project examples? Recapping a project that your firm did for them in the past, or describing projects for other clients that they may not know your firm completed?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Really good question. You know, I think that it depends on the type of work. I mean, for sure. I mean, in some cases, you know, I think maybe what's most important is trying to link it and tie it back to whatever is being advertised. So if it's let's say it was some innovative, you know, aspect to the project, and you think there's some innovation that relates to what the service is being asked for here, that's the link and connection. You know, I think it's a good combination of the work that you've done in the past versus what you're capable of doing for them, especially if it's a service they're not familiar with, that you have that as expertise. You know, I know firms, you know, are much larger than those that are just here in the state. So, you know, wherever you're at, you may have to demonstrate you have that past experience with the client, and then also these capabilities that you can bring to them that maybe you haven't used in the past.
Good. Chris, we talked a little bit about this, but just maybe a little more detail. If you've never worked with an agency before, how do you get your first job?
I mean, I think you've got to meet with them, and you've got to understand that it's not going to be you're going to get a job after the first meeting. I mean, there have been some clients where it's been a multi-month, multi-year crescendo to try to get the opportunity to work with the firm. I think you got to be just genuine and show interest and not get disappointed when you don't get selected that first one that you submit on. But I think it's very much understanding how to learn their business and learn where they need consultants, and then trying to craft that around what it is that you do well and how you can provide value, and be in it for the long run. Because if you're a consultant and you get disappointed every time you lose, you're going to be disappointed a lot, because there are sometimes 8 to 12 submittals and the city's only selected one, and it's tough.
Good point. Something else I would say, once you do get that job, you need to try to knock it out of the park, because, the key to success, I think, in the consulting business is repeat clients. So
Yes.
When you get that first job that you've been working so hard for, you really need to make them glad that they selected you. Preston, I'm going to throw you one quick one before we wrap up. Often there's a concern about age being more important than ability. Some clients only want to talk with the gray hairs when it comes to business development. How can younger consultants overcome this concern?
I have no hair, so I don't know how to really respond to that question. No, that's obviously, it's almost like the skill set too, right? I mean, you have to know your client and you have to pace yourself to that. I mean, obviously, I've chased work in the past where I've run into the same situation, which has been described. I was told that at the time that I was chasing something that I was too young for that. It came back in feedback after interviewing and so forth. And I don't really know if there's a good answer for that. I mean, I think it's just part of those winning and losing projects, to get the right match. It's a very unfortunate situation that occurs. But I don't think you should let it be discouraging, and ultimately you're going to chase and win work that you enjoy, and that's going to be the professional reward there. And, frankly, if those persons, said that, then they lost out on a great skill set, and you'll just keep working and pushing in your career and profession.
Yeah, very good. Hey guys, thanks so much. I think this has been fantastic. I've enjoyed it. Hopefully the audience has enjoyed it. We've had some great questions. And once again, I want to thank the Southern District for putting on this mentorship series. And as I mentioned at the beginning, this is being recorded, so it will be posted on the Southern District website. So encourage others who may be interested in this topic to look at this when they get a chance. And I think with that, we'll close. And Chris and Preston, once again, thanks. I really appreciate.
Absolutely.
Great stuff.
Good stuff. Appreciate it, guys. I'll take care.
Everybody take care. Bye.